Good morning, everyone. My name is Gigi, and I'm a community navigator with the Illinois Prison Project. I'm also someone who knows the system from the inside. I've served 8.5 years in IDOC. So when I say this work is personal, I mean it with my whole chest. Now we could talk about freedom 1,000 different ways because it can mean 1,000 different things. For some, it's a right. For others, it's a privilege. And for far too many, it's a distant dream. Locked behind bars or buried under policy. Let's be real. As we watch the powers that be try to remodel this country into something unrecognizable, the conversation around freedom isn't important, it's urgent. Today, we are digging into what freedom really is, what it costs when it's taken away, and what it could look like if we actually build a justice system rooted in dignity, healing, and release, not just punishment. So get ready. We're not just talking about freedom. We're unpacking it, challenging it, and reimagining it. Let's get into it. Today, our panel guests consist of Dr. Sylvia Begay-Pullum, who is a system impacted leader and IPP ambassador. Dr. Sylvia is a founder of Shattered Vessels Broken Arrows Community Development Corporation and Shekinah Women's Ministries, both dedicated to restoring abused families and women nationwide. She is the regional supervisor for Energy Services Partnership Coordinator, a legal victims advocate, certified business coach, and coordinator of special music ministry. Next, we have Latoya Baines, who is also an IPP ambassador. Latoya, after experiencing 9.5 years of incarceration, she returned home and immediately focused full-time parenting while embarking on her professional journey. She is a case manager at Also Chicago, a role that allows her to support others in ways she never thought possible. She holds a certificate of achievement in case management and has been honored with a Resilience Award. And lastly, we have Miss Hallie Bezner. Hallie is a criminal defense attorney who practices in state and federal courts throughout Illinois. She grew up in Texas, has a bachelor degree in journalism from the University of Illinois, and received her JD from DePaul University. Her particular areas of interest and expertise are children charged in adult criminal court and adults who have been serving prison sentences since they were children. She's that girl, y'all. We are excited to hear from all of our amazing guests. So I'm going to ask to everybody, what does the word freedom mean to you? And we'll start with Dr. Sylvia.
Well, good morning, beautiful people. My name is Dr. Sylvia Begay Pullum. And in reference to your question, Gigi, I want to say that to me, freedom means extreme possibilities. For me, when you are free mentally, emotionally, and physically, you have innumerable possibilities for success. And that's what freedom means to me. In every area, there's a possibility. There's a what if for you to be successful in your life.
You, Latoya.
Okay, what freedom means to me is to having a chance to actually rebuild life, to be free in that with purpose and with your dignity. Freedom is meaning to get yourself back together. It's a powerful in choosing a new path for yourself and a new life for yourself. It's healing in that to be free. It's also in doing that with freedom, you're also giving something back to your community because you heal together and not by yourself.
Fuck it. Hallie.
I think to me, freedom means having choices. People who are incarcerated don't have choices. They're told where to go, what to do, who to be. And incarceration looks like a lot of different things. It looks like prison sentences, but it also looks like house arrest or parole, or there are lots of different ways that we incarcerate people. And, people on parole can't pack up the car and drive to, Vegas this weekend because they don't have the choice to do that. They're being told where they can go and what they can do. And same thing with people on like pretrial house arrest or electronic monitoring. Like you can't walk the dog when the dog wants a walk because you're not allowed to leave the house. You don't have choices that, the rest of us, if I want to get up and go somewhere, I can. If I want to get up and do something, I can. And I think that's what freedom means.
I'm gonna keep it on Hallie really quickly. Um, what is your understanding of freedom before and after you became a lawyer?
Oh Lord. I mean, that's my whole worldview has changed since being a lawyer. It's again, that sort of thing, like making choices. That's something that I certainly still do take for granted often, but it's something that I took for granted way more beforehand. Even I was thinking about it the other day after I got the email to be on this panel. I was out in the yard watering my flowers. And this is weird, but I think a lot like how could I survive prison? How would I survive prison? What would life be like for me in prison? And that's one of the things that I thought about. Like, if I was in prison, I wouldn't have flowers to water. Just like the things that you take for granted, that's something that brings me joy every day. And that is something that wouldn't be available to me. And I think a lot about it, like on holidays, we just had Father's Day. Like, on Father's Day, you think about not just fathers who are incarcerated, but I think about children of incarcerated fathers, and how, like, when we imprison a person, you imprison the whole family. You don't just imprison the one person. So I think about, any holidays, Christmas, Thanksgiving, I think about what are my, I'm eating a delicious meal. What are my clients eating today in jail? So it's definitely shifted my worldview a lot, but I do, it's the little things that I think about a lot, like, going to Starbucks to get a coffee. I'm like, that's something that I can choose to do. That people who are incarcerated don't have that option. Even I have nice, cold, clean water. People in prison don't have that.
Yeah.
So just like little stuff, I think about that a lot.
Okay. Dr. Sylvia, how does your view of freedom shift before, during, and after incarceration?
Well, just like Hallie, before then, taken for granted, didn't realize the different caveats to being free, simple things, catching the bus, waking up in the morning when you felt like it to go to work, as opposed to 4:30 in the morning, incarcerated. And so, it's very funny that Hallie mentioned that about flowers, because I was out in my garden in my yard on my lawn the other day, and that's exactly what I thought about too. No joke. Freedom for me brings you into gratefulness. And I begin to think about the flowers and the seeds and, being able to smell the flowers and having a landscaped, lawn, compared to when I was in prison, being a part of the horticulture team,
Mm.
saying, oh, I wish I had a garden like this, taking those little things for granted. And so now, post incarceration gives me the passion even more so to be a voice for those who seemingly have none, in which we can help them understand that there is a life outside of incarceration and that it can be fruitful, just like the lawns and the seeds. It can be very fruitful, but we've just got to keep pushing and we've got to keep fighting and keep being a voice for those who think they don't have rights and they don't have a voice to speak of what humanity looks like. And so for me, that's what freedom brings me into gratefulness.
Okay. Thank you. I love that answer. Toya.
Before incarceration, I took my freedom for granted. It was just a choice, like I never thought that I would be incarcerated. I kind of looked at certain situations like, yeah, that wouldn't be me. I wouldn't put myself in there. But sometimes life happens. And during my incarceration, I learned a deeper meaning of freedom. I had to learn to hold on to strength when I didn't have the strength to even carry on. I had to learn how to parent from prison because I was a mother before I went to prison. I was still a mother in prison. I had to reflect on some of the choices that I've made to make better decisions in my future. And during that time, it was very difficult, but it actually built me up. So upon my release, I was able to have the ability to know what I needed to do. And healing was the number one thing, because some of the things that led me to prison was unhealed trauma. And through that, now I'm able to have the ability to rebuild with my family and my children. And not only that, but my community, because the healing and that trauma had a big effect on me. So it really, really showed me and enlightened me on what we take for granted daily.
Okay. So I'm gonna keep it on you. What support would have made your path to freedom quicker or less painful?
For me, it would have been having real support. My family didn't really understand what I had just endured. They expected me to be the same person I was before I went to prison 9.5 years ago. If they really would have took some time to actually ask questions, or even have the ability just to give me a hug, that would have made that would have helped me a lot. When I came home, I had to find housing. I had to find work. I had to have people to believe in me for who I was today, not of my past. And I really wish I would have had that support. But in that, I still was able to manage, because I had the support of my communities, of my sisters. My sisters filled in the gap of the things that I couldn't say. They said for me. They did for me, and they helped me along the way. But with your community, that goes a long way. So if we have more wraparound services to support individuals when they're coming home, not only are you supporting us, but you're supporting those family members too, because the family don't understand what we just endured. We need to have more of that. We need to have more chances to rebuild and to guide along the way. I didn't need somebody just to hand me something. I needed somebody to hold my hand and walk with me. And we need that more often.
Okay. Dr. Sylvia, what you got to say to that?
One thing that I noticed when I was incarcerated was that there was a stigma that every woman that was in prison had done something to get there. And although that may be partially true, I came to understand that most of us were put in the same bag. And my thing was, if they only knew the caveats, the difference of what took place, maybe they could see me a little bit differently, to know that it happened for a reason. And for me, it had to happen. And I'm going to answer that piece. But the support system that stigmatized that I should have been behind bars. You see, back then, when I was incarcerated for what, total of 8.5 years, but 7.5 years in IDOC, I didn't have a Me Too movement back then. You know, now we hear about the Me Too movement. The girls are speaking out about the abuse. I didn't have that back then. As a matter of fact, I was told that I shouldn't share until it was time for trial. And so there was a muzzle on my mouth. So my support system was one of which everyone looked at me the same as all the others. They didn't know that I was a paralegal before I became incarcerated, and that this particular instance or occurrence was the last straw that broke the camel's back concerning domestic violence that was prominent in my family. For a very long time, I blamed my mother. And although that was partially true, because that particular lifestyle of toxic relationship, that was one I saw for 30 plus years. And so it molded me as a tender age child until I came into dating. But I had to come to myself, as Latoya talked about healing. I had to come to know that that aha moment was when one of the outreach workers, prison workers, said, I need you to make a list. You keep blaming your mom, but I want you to make a list of the pros and the cons in your life concerning your mother. And it was at that time the epiphany was I was holding on to that one situation of non-freedom. If it wasn't for her in the relationship, then I wouldn't have been a victim, or I wouldn't have been the abuser. And it
Mm,
took that for me to understand, once I came into that aha of freedom, the rest would be on me. It would be my choice to make and to reiterate my life and to change the trajectory of my life. And so that's what the freedom took. It took me from not knowing to begin to know who I was and who I could be.
Thank you for that.
You're
So,
welcome.
Hallie, I'm gonna ask you a little slightly different question. What legal or policy changes would most dramatically improve access to freedom in Illinois, in your opinion?
I have like 10 answers to this question, but what just came to mind when I was hearing Latoya give her answer, I mean, what would make anybody's life easier? Money. I think anybody in the world, no matter how much money you have, you can always use more. And I have a client right now that is at the end of a very long sentence in IDOC, and he is at the Adult Transition Center in Peoria. And I mean, it's still prison, but I don't have enough good things to say about the program that they have there. He is able to work a good job. He is able to save money. He is able to get experience so that when he is released in a year, he is going to have money to put a down payment on an apartment, to get a car. He can keep the job that he has, so he will have stability. And that is something that I frankly find it horrifying that that is not the norm. That should be the norm, not the exception. And you guys would know, correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't believe there is a program like that for women. We do nothing for women.
Nope.
And very few men get the benefit of this program that he's in. And he will, when he gets out, he will have a lot of money saved. And that is, from what you know, obviously haven't been in those shoes myself, but like that's why it's easy for people to recidivate is because they don't have other options. If fast money is the only money you know how to make, then that's what you're going to do when you get out because the bills have to be paid, rent has to be paid. You don't have credit, you don't have a credit card, you have nothing. And as I was preparing for this morning, I sent the questions to one of my girlfriends and we were talking about it. And we were reminded that we sat at a table last year at an event with a man who had just gotten out of prison after serving a very long sentence. And one of his friends came over to get an Uber for him and to like take him to the Uber because he didn't know how to do that. Because when he went to prison, there was no Uber. There was, and like back then we were told don't get in cars with strangers. And now we're telling you to get into a car with a stranger, just stuff that like that's kind of stuff is really hard. And so I think that, if we're going to invest so much money in prisons, we need to be investing not in warehousing people. We need to be investing in helping people and giving them access. I have a client right now who the first legal job that he's ever had has been the one that his probation officer helped him get. And like, what if we could have helped him get a job before he became involved in the criminal justice system? And that's what it made me think about when Latoya said, she didn't need a hand out. She needed someone to hold her hand doing it. And I look at it the same way. Like people want to work. They want to provide for themselves, but if you don't have an ID, if you don't have a bank account, if you don't have a social security card, you can't go get a job. And I think that it is just a colossal failure that we warehouse people for so long. And then we're like, well, good luck
Mhm.
without any, help transitioning them. And I did see Sylvia in the chat, you did say, so there is one in Aurora for women. There's an ATC, but yeah, I mean, everybody
I don't
should
know
be
if
in a
they
transition.
maneuver the way that the one you talking about. As far as like helping with housing, they do that too, Sylvia.
Well, they do the same thing that Hallie was mentioning as far as they put them on a plan so that
Oh,
they
well,
can
yeah, yeah.
save and stack
Mhm.
money. They have to work,
Right.
and they
Well, and
have
that's
different things.
and again, as someone who is not an incarcerated person, like I actually had the opportunity the other night to talk to the judge that sentenced my client and to tell him, how well he's doing. And one of the things that I was saying is like, as a taxpayer, I love that. because
Mhm.
they are paying taxes, they are contributing, they are, participating in the economy. And that's something that everybody should get behind and should support. And it just makes so much more sense for us to like put people on that. So I think that if we're going to be spending money on prisons, we should be insisting that people are getting resources so that they can help themselves when they get out. And I truly believe that's what people want to do. They're not looking for a handout, but we've got to get the barriers out of the way so that people can do
Do it.
what they want to do.
I agree. I agree 1,000% because even with the Uber thing, like it's funny you say that. That was a thought when somebody told me just get an Uber. I'm like, I ain't getting in a car with no stranger.
Right.
Yeah.
And people doing it, like kids is ordering Uber. And I'm like, so you gonna let your child get in the car? Okay,
Yeah,
all
that's
right.
what we do now.
Right. So you are right. If I can just touch on a little bit, I think what would help, like these things, if IDOC, obviously they're probably not, but these are the things to know because coming home after 20, 30, 40 years, like I've seen it. I've seen some people really like not be able to grasp with what's going on. I've seen, I just want to put this so it's on record, but it's real. I know of a man who did 40 years. He has a condo, nice big condo, and he hangs out in his bathroom. And his response is it's too big out there. And I think about that and I'm like, who's gonna help him? Who's gonna help him? How do you help him? How do you help someone break that when you've caged somebody for 40 years and now, being in an open space is like not okay for them. Like they prefer that. So, and we think about him being free, right? And is he really free? Um, so I'll ask Toya and Sylvia the same question. What legal or policy changes would most dramatically improve access to freedom in Illinois?
Well, for me, looking back, understanding my situation and so many others, and that's what I do now, working with shattered vessels, broken arrows, because that particular title, that nonprofit name, which was created in prison, by the way, um, it symbolizes broken women and men, and understanding that a person sometimes they don't have the capacity. The capacity is the maximum amount of which something can contain something, right? And so understanding that when I went to prison, just like so many others, we didn't have the capacity mentally to understand what took place,
Mm-hmm.
how it happened, how it can be changed. And so for me, during that time, knowing that I didn't have the mental health, it was available, but not readily available. You had to drop slips. You had to go through so many loops and hoops in order to be able to sit in front of someone, to the point where for me, it had to be an act of God, because I began to do self-help and read about my situation. I read about domestic violence, family trauma, as Latoya talked about. And so the mental health piece is so important. You just talked about it, Gigi. You touched on it, how the man, he has free reign of this beautiful condo, but he wants to stay in a little corner because in his mind, mentally, it's too big out there.
Mm-hmm.
He's been institutionalized and not understand he can stretch out. This is his place. So the mental health piece is so very important, because
Absolutely.
I believe once you change that and you get to the root of a thing, once you change someone's mindset, you can change their life.
In life. Absolutely.
And I'm a living witness, and all of us on here are living witnesses that this is true.
I agree. That was great answer. Thank you. Toya, you think you can
They just really hit on everything. So I'm gonna try. But one thing I think that would be so important is for us, we have to go through a lot of barriers when we get home to get our records sealed or expunged.
Mm-hmm.
I think that needs to be on the front and center. I think that matters because with our records, we can't really get very far.
Mhm.
I also believe that we need to bring the parole board back. When we had, like, I am a true witness of how when you go before the parole board, I won my clemency. I was able to be released. We need to have that back. We need to give those second chances, because what are we really promoting here? We need to have more rehabilitations for people. And then also, one of the biggest things is when we get released, we are stuck with fines. I am stuck with a whole list of fines for things that I'm still trying to figure out. That's the barrier. Like, how can I pay my fines and I can't get a job? That don't make sense.
Mhm.
We need to look into things like that.
Save
And those
money.
are the,
Yeah.
yeah, money. The same thing
It
that you
costs
said,
money
Hallie.
to do
Like,
everything.
it costs money to do everything. It costs money when our family, when we're in there. All the years that I was in there, I'm thinking, like, counting up my money receipts, like, man, we spent a lot of money. We gave a lot of money that could have been used somewhere else. We need to expand when we are released. We need to expand having housing. Can we get some housing? Can somebody help us with housing? Can we get that a little bit? Like Sylvia said, we need mental health. That's the biggest piece is the mental health, because the trauma that you endure by being in there, and then they expect for you to come out and just walk on golden eggs. Like, hey, it's good. That's not realistic. We have to be
Mhm.
realistic. And in order to do that, we have to enforce it. We can't ask them. We have to tell them what we need. And at this point, that's what needs to happen. That's how, I mean, that's what needs to
I
happen.
agree, but I'll touch and go a little further with that. I think society has a job, a duty to let us know that that our voices matter, because that's a problem. We come home and because of our backgrounds, that's how we treat it. Like we don't matter. Like we're not citizens. Like we don't vote and pay taxes. And so I think that's why a lot of us come home and are quiet, because we like, if when I say something, nobody answers, nobody helps. So what's the point? And so I think society and the communities has a duty to, once we are released, to include us. Because even in conversations, I mean, let's be real, especially in these types of conversations, impacted women are included in these conversations. They're not. And let's just be real, they'll wheel the men in. Hey, we need somebody to talk about incarceration, and they bring men in. So when they find out women have been incarcerated, it's like, wait, what? You what? Because people, it's like we don't even exist, right? Like we unicorns or something. And so I think society could do better with including us and understanding that we are here. We do get locked up and we do get released, right? So that's my spiel on that.
So I know you guys know this, but a lot of people don't. So in Illinois, we like the 90s were awful. They were awful everywhere. And all these laws passed that like dramatically increased mass incarceration. So in Illinois, the two things that I think of, like when I just read the questions that we were going to be going through, the first thing that I thought of was truth in sentencing and firearm add-ons. It used to be that someone serving a sentence for first degree murder served 20 to 60 years and they served 50% of that sentence. Now, first degree murder is a minimum of 45 actual years if it's committed with a firearm. That is insane. That is an insane sentence. We are giving children life sentences. No one who's 25 years old and gets a 45-year sentence is coming home. Like, that's a death sentence if you get the minimum. Like, 45 years of IDOC healthcare, like you're not coming home after that. And I mentioned I grew up in Texas and I have friends in the justice system in Texas. And I think that we often get a little complacent in Illinois because we think like, oh, we're Democrats, we're liberal, we're a blue state. Like first degree murder in Texas, the sentencing range is 5 to 99 years. In Illinois, it's a minimum of 45.
Yeah.
It's a minimum 5 in Texas, where they still have the death penalty. Like, what are we doing?
Yeah.
And I think like that's what I think of when I think of like what legal and policy changes need to change. Like that firearm add-on has to go.
Absolutely.
And these sentences, these enormous numbers with no opportunity for parole, like Latoya said, like we are, I know that the conversation here has been geared towards like people who are eventually coming home, but there are a lot of people who are not ever coming home. And that's, we should be ashamed of ourselves.
Absolutely.
And the fact that we lock people up, we throw away the key, and then we expect them to behave while they're in there. Like, what? I think it's shameful, and I think that our legislators should be ashamed of themselves, and I think we all should be ashamed for being complicit in it and allowing it to, it's been 25 years since this passed. We know better than we did in 1998. So why are we still doing this?
I agree. I agree. And I would add accountability on that because think of how many people, including self, who get incarcerated for just being somewhere or knowing some or not saying
And
something.
and that's another one. Illinois has the worst
Oh,
laws on
yeah.
that.
Absolutely. So I would definitely agree. I was also affected by the gun enhancement, and I never had it was testified that a gun was to my head the whole time, but I still was charged with a gun. Like
Yeah.
it make sense, and it don't.
It's crazy.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Thank you for that. How can lawyers, advocates, and community members work together to build change since we're talking about these policies? Let's get into it. So how do you think we as a community, as what do you think can be done together to build change?
We need to vote. People need to vote. Formerly incarcerated people can vote. And I
Mm,
think that a lot of people don't know that. People with felony convictions can vote in Illinois, can and should be ashamed for not. And
absolutely.
not just in the presidential election every 4 years. Everybody needs to vote in every election. You need to vote for your alderman. You need to vote for water reclamation district. You need to vote for anything you can vote for. You need to vote. And I think that's huge. Something small that I always try to do in my life, um, I get all sorts of emails that are like, write your legislator about this. And they take you to the website that, like, it's just a form you fill out. And that's really easy to do. And so some of my friends and I forward those emails to my friends, and I'll just be like, I don't remember. There was one, oh, the one about like physical mail in IDOC. I
Mhm.
sent it to a bunch of my girlfriends, and I was like, listen, I know that to most people, this seems like this is kind of silly, but here's why physical mail is important. And here's why you, as someone who has never been to prison and doesn't know anybody who's ever been to prison, should care because, maintaining connections with your family is important. And like, I had several girlfriends that were like, cool, I just wrote my legislator. I had no idea this was a big deal, but like, yes, people in prison should get mail. So I think, like what we're doing now, just talking about it.
Absolutely.
I think that people do care. They just don't know. Like I said, a lot of my girlfriends who have not been incarcerated don't know people who have been incarcerated. They were just kind of taken up. What do you mean people can't get mail in prison? Like, but now they know because I talked about it.
Mhm.
So I think just like, and then they were able to write their legislators. And when you can write your legislator and say, like, hey, my name's Hallie, I live in your ward and I vote. I vote every time. And this is what's important to me.
Agree with Holly. It starts right here, right now, as we have a lawyer here that has access to the laws that we don't know about, that can listen to us, that can push that through. Advocates, with the advocates, is their duties to lift the voices, to silence. Like you said, G, it's a lot of people that don't speak. But when you're an advocate, you fill in that gap for them.
Mhm.
You are the voice to be heard. And as a community members, they're the lived experience. You know what I'm saying? So with the community members, they're in there. They know what we need. So when all three come together, that's a great force. That's a great force. And that's what we need. We need more rooms like this. We need more rooms like this. We need more open doors like this. And we can be the change that we want to see, but we have to continue to work at it. We can't give up because it's a fight. It's definitely a fight and it's a battle. And I'm not giving up because I need to see some change.
For sure. And Dr. Sylvia.
Yeah, so I echo the same. I concur with everything that Hallie has said and Latoya. Voting is your power. Holding these senators and these political figures accountable. They say they want this, community stakeholders, because one thing I've come to know is that, and I shared this when I spoke the first time, was that prior to incarceration, I thought incarceration was just like the Prison Break movie. I had no clue of the ins and outs. I had no clue of the dynamic. And it wasn't until I got behind the walls to understand how everything started to unravel, hearing the stories. So, voting and holding political people that have the power of the pen accountable for making the changes is important. And number two, exposure. Again, I knew nothing about it. The girlfriends knew nothing about the mail system, in prison, that prisoners were not, or justice impacted individuals were not getting mail, which is so important. That's just like gold when you get a letter from home or from someone that says, I care, thinking about you. So I just really appreciate the exposure and the collaborations that we're engaging in to bring about what's really taking place in prison and outside of prison. And those, there's a statement that says you throw enough mud against the wall, something's gonna stick. So
Mhm.
as long as we keep hitting it, we keep putting the head on the nail, keep hitting it, something is gonna change. And we know that by laws now that have changed that maybe 10 years ago weren't moving the needle, but now they're changing. And so the work is so important and it's consistent.
I agree. I'd go a little further and say, I think the one thing that lawyers, advocates, and community members can do to build real change is ask questions. I think people assume the things we struggle with are finding a job and finding housing, and that's it, right? And I think about, like, even with my family, because I have a job and I have my own apartment, everybody think I'm good. It's like, oh, she got it. You know what I'm saying? You know, like, there are so many other aspects to it. Like, the mental aspect of, like, get having stuff to do all day. Like, it's a constant, you in prison, you got one assignment. You got to get up and go to work from this time to this time, and after that, you're not, that's that, right? Now I come home and I got 50 things to do on top of trying to parent my little brother, on top of just trying to find some sanity in a day because I've been going crazy all day, and nobody understands that. Phone ringing, we're used to having to call people. Now people call us and we yearn for that in a joint, and now that we home, it drives me nuts. Well, I'm like, stop calling, please. As much as you yearn for that, you come, and it's things like that that we don't realize bother us, and you won't realize it until you home. Um, and I think that's the one thing, if communities and people ask questions, what do you need? What is wrong? What's the problem? How can we help? I think it would be more, we could get the help that we need because people just not asking questions. People assume, how you assume I needed that. Did you ask me? I'm big on that. Don't make choices for me. Ask me. Now that I have the ability to make my own choices, I get mad if somebody make a choice for me, even if it's you brought me apple juice and I wanted orange juice. Did you ask me? Like, it's real because it's just in a slight moment you can be back in prison mentally, right? If somebody, and you don't even realize it, and that's what I mean by asking questions. Being at work and people say stuff to you and immediately you just like, like, hold up, and it's like you have to ask questions. That will be my answer. On top of everything you all said. I feel like we answered all the questions. We got some good stuff. I really appreciate you all for joining us on this month's Lunch and Learn. We hope that you can take something away from this powerful conversation. Those watching, here are a few things to reflect on and ways to get involved. You can definitely get involved with organizations like Illinois Prison Project, Whether you're a lawyer, a writer, or just someone who cares, there's a role for you in this movement. Your time and talents can bring someone closer to freedom. This week, we are highlighting a Thawing Out Toolkit. This is a part of our Freedom series in which we offer some advice specifically for people going through the reentry process. The Thawing Out Toolkit specifically focuses on the emotional challenges people face during reentry and some advice about ways to overcome those challenges. Reentry is an exhilarating and exciting time as you dive back into the feelings of freedom, but there are also many unexpected difficulties that you have to face at the same time. Prison acts as a social, emotional icebox. When people spend enough time inside, they have to freeze parts of themselves just to survive. When people leave that icebox, they slowly start to thaw out and start to unpack emotional trauma and injuries they have had frozen for years. The Thawing Out Toolkit discusses these challenges and offers solutions to help overcome them. If this sounds like something that will be helpful for you or a loved one, please visit our website under Reentry Resources. Freedom has many meanings, but one truth: it cannot thrive in silence. Thank you for showing up today, for listening, and for bearing witness. May what you have heard echo beyond this room, and may it push us all to imagine and create something better, greater, and way more freer than what we have right now. Thank you so much and have a great day.